I became really interested in sound and painting, I think almost since the beginning. When I first started making art, I was very trained in a very academic way. So I learned to work from the model, the kind of thing I teach now. I teach foundation drawing. So this very old-fashioned way of learning to draw. And so I went through all, like I think like many artists, I went through the process of working very realistically, then working more expressionistically, and then realizing slowly and slowly that I got interested in the surface of the painting. So I was very interested in how, not just what I was painting, so the figure, because I was mainly painting figures, I was in the very beginning doing figurative work, but interested in the way the paint surface would go long, long, short, long, short. So it almost had a sound to me. And so the paintings were getting very built up over time. And looking, this was now in the 80s. And actually, I brought some since this is for a library production, I brought some books that I have covers of. So this is one book, and you can see how the paint is. This is my expressionistic phase, we might say. So I went from realistic to impressionistic, down expression. So the paint got very built up. And here is another one where you can see that the figure is very small, but the surface is very, very rough. So the surface started to take on dimension. Oh, I brought another one. This was this was a drawing when I was a student that became the inspiration for this story by Jane Ann Phillips. So so this is still moving sort of into the expressionistic stage. So the surface had gotten really built up, and I was really getting conscious of this sort of movement of the surface. And also as it got built up, it got really heavy. So then I started painting the paintings on boxes instead of canvas because the canvas would sag because of the heaviness of the paint. So then I had these boxes I was painting on, and that was one thing. That was one big step towards at least moving the paintings into space. And then the other big step was I had been painting all these figures. I was a figurative painter, and as you can see, and people would say to me, "Oh, I like that painting, but the woman looks so sad in it, you know?" And I would say to them, "Yeah, but that green underneath the red, don't you like?" And I realized that I am showing people the figure when what I'm really interested in is the paint. So then I started cutting. I took a painting and I painted the parts of it. And so then the figure was gone. Well, the figure was sort of maybe just the corner of a skirt or something like that. So it still had a figurative feel to me, but it was now very much built up and really about that green underneath the red or whatever it was I was interested in. So now I had these sort of abstract paintings that I was painting on boxes. And one day I came into my studio and I thought, oh, they look pretty good on the floor. Why don't I just leave them on the floor? So I started to realize the paintings don't have to go on a wall. They could go on the floor. And then I started thinking, well, they could go across the room, actually. Why does it have to stay on one wall? So then I did a painting that stretched across the room. So it was like a big beam that you had to actually go underneath. So all of this was moving now the painting into space. But I was still very much interested in this idea of sound. But I didn't know how to go about doing it. There were a number of obstacles, and I still wasn't there yet. So at some point, the paintings were getting really big, and I had this idea to do an updated Baroque ceiling painting. So I decided I would make paintings that went on the ceiling, and they would flip over from night to day. So it'd be like, you look up and you'd see those sky paintings, but this one would change from night to day. So I worked on it for a long time. I had all the boxes that I made, the different parts of the sky, and one side was blue. And then I realized, I don't know how to get them to flip. I don't know anything about motors. I don't know any of these things. So I was really beside myself, and someone suggested, Mary, how are you? And I said, oh, I can't, I'm in such a horrible situation. I want to make this painting, and I can't make it. And they said, oh, I know this retired mechanic. I think he works with artists. So I called him, and I went over, and I said, this is what I want to do. And he said, okay, come back in a couple of weeks. And I came back in a couple of weeks. And he said, okay, we're going to do this. It's going to have bicycle chains, and we'll use motors, and we'll do all this. And I said, great. And he said, I thought like $3,000 would be fair as a price for doing this. I would say the project was really like a $30,000 project. But anyway, I panicked. And he said to me, what's the problem? I said, I don't have $3,000. And he said to me, don't you have a grant to do this? And I said, no. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, I really, really want to make this piece. So he said to me, all right, why don't you come here and I'll teach you how to weld and how to use the milling machine and how to use the table saw, and you do the work, and I'll charge you $2.50 an hour to use the shop. And dinner is thrown in. So I said, great. So I had the best education of my life. I went there every day, learned how to use the various tools. They were the book that you have now, that's with the What If You Could Hear Painting, is dedicated to them because they really made it possible for me to move into the realm of sound. So we made the updated Baroque ceiling painting, and then I wanted to make another piece. And I sort of kept going to the shop and making work. And at one point, I heard this piece by George Antil called The Ballet Mécanique. And I thought it was fantastic. And on the way home, I had an idea for a new piece, which would be a painting would move across the room. It would trip off another painting. It would cause a buzzer to go. Because I was always interested in sound, but I'm not a composer. So I thought, well, at least I can use buzzers and things like that. So I went to the machine shop and I said, this is what I want to do. I want to have a painting go across the room. Do you think it's possible? Yeah, cool. Let's get George. So their friend George came, and we talked about what I wanted to do. And they said, yeah, okay. But Mary, you're going to have to now learn a little bit about circuitry because it's ridiculous to do all this mechanically. So then I had to learn. So that piece they did help me with, and then I started to learn to program. So I could program my own pieces because George would do the programming for me for some of my work, and then I'd always have things I wanted to adjust or something, and I didn't like bothering him. So found a way to learn programming, and George helped me. So, and about this time, I was on a residency, and I met a composer, and we were very much sort of in sync. And I said to him, I've always wanted to do work with sound because I think there's a real relationship between painting and sound, and I would say your sounds match my sort of aesthetic. And so anyway, he said, yeah, let's do something together. Let's collaborate. So he gave me 4 different sounds and was saying, Mary, why don't you make one of your multi-sided paintings? So my paintings had then now started being inside rooms and moving or flipping. And he said, why don't you make one of your multi-sided paintings? And they could just move, and like moving speakers. I said, well, that's an idea. So I made 4 boxes, or 5-sided paintings, top, bottom, side. And 2 sides were polished aluminum, and the rest were my typical heavy paint. And the top surface was very thin and was attached to a called transducer. So the top of the painting actually became a speaker. So he gave me 4 different sounds, and each box plays the sound for it. And sometimes the 2 sounds are on the same time. Sometimes one is just playing, one time another. And I programmed them so that they move across the room on the floor, and they pass I painted them gray like Whistler there's another artist, Whistler, everyone knows from Whistler's Mother. But he also was very interested in nocturnes and in the relationship between music and sound also. So this is an homage to Whistler. And the paintings are kind of dusty gray with polished aluminum on the side. And his paintings were like this gray, those nocturnes are very gray and mystical. Anyway, so the paintings move, and I call them paintings. They move and they pass each other, and you can see them reflected. And it's a very melancholy sound, and they never meet, and they just. So I started work, and then another composer asked me if I would do work with him, and he gave me a piece, and it was called. It relates to another book, which is Eerie After Dark by Murakami. I hope I say it right. And it's the story of, it's this. If you one way you could say the story, it's a story about a woman trapped in a television set. So he did a whole opera, and he gave me the prelude for it. And so what I did and he asked me to do something with it and to bring it to China to perform in a concert. So I thought, okay, I've got to get it on the plane, and I've got to get it in China. And so I made a box that I brought on stage, and then I unwrapped it and took off the top, which was an ink painting that was, again, had a speaker. So the speaker played the sound made for the paint, for the box. So I put the speaker down, let it up, so it was that in concert hall. So first the pianist plays, the first composer came out, and then they redo the stage, the next person comes out and plays, and then they redid the stage, they pushed everything aside, and I brought the box out. And the box performed. There was no other performers, the box performed. And the box, once I opened it and put it to the side, it starts to open these flaps. And as it opens the flaps, it's all light inside, like a Pandora's box. It plays the sound that was composed for it. So it plays its own sound. So there was that piece, and so I was doing a number of different things with composers, which really, really interesting. It's been a delight. It's changed. Like working with mechanics, it has changed my life. And then, but I still wanted to deal with this issue of the paint surface. So I was now working with composers whose aesthetic was parallel to mine and doing pieces that combined the two, but I wanted to go back to the surface of the painting. So I was talking to a friend of mine who works in sound, a lot with sound, and he actually audified earthquakes, Florian Dambois. He actually came here and did something for his DBC. And he told me, well, Mary, the problem is you need really dense data, because if sound needs a lot of data. So you're going to need a very, very good scan in order to have enough data for someone to translate into sound. So a friend of mine's a doctor, and she said, oh, well, ask around. And there was a doctor, Brett Boma, at Harvard, and he said, oh, he could get one of his students, grad students, to scan the painting for me. So they scanned the painting for me. They scanned 5 parts of the paintings, because 1 inch is very big for them, because they're doing things in the brain. So he scanned the painting for me, and then I asked my friend Florian, I said, can you translate it to sound? He said, no, but he said, you really need someone with a musical ear, which I don't have. So I'll introduce you to another Florian Grund in Montreal, and I'll do a virtual introduction, and you two can, he would be better than me to do this. So Florian Grund and I met via Skype, and I told him the project, said, yeah, I would be interested. And I went up to Montreal, and I told him what I wanted to do. So he said, yeah, he could do it. So he took that data. He also audified sculptures for the blind, so they can hear sculptures. This is one of his projects. So he has an algorithm that he has set up. And one of the things that we did that's different than what artists and scientists have done in the past is typically people focus on synesthesia, on translating color into sound, because there's color frequency and sound frequency. So this makes more sense. And some people say they have synesthesia, so they see sound and color at the same time. I don't think I have this quality, but I was thinking that it's really the surface of the painting, that when everyone looks at a painting, I think they don't just look at it they look at it quickly, but I think your brain takes in a lot of information. And artists often, when they look at a painting, they look at it very, very slowly. They're looking at all of this kind of thing, which I think everyone does anyway. You just aren't aware. You're not so conscious of this time passing. And the ear is really good at things that pass over time. So anyway, he created all the sounds for the different surfaces of the painting, and we chose a route that would look kind of like a drawing through the painting and turned it into sound. And it's based, like I said, on the depth. So the sound, if it's far away, it's a very reverberant sound. And if it's close up, it's a very sharp sound. So it sounds very close or very far away. And the sound he used was human vowel sounds, because he said they're the least source identifiable. So you can't usually identify just a vowel sound by itself. And then he stretched it out a bit. So the painting has a voice. It has but I didn't want to just say, here's the painting, here's the sound. That would be sort of boring. So I made a structure where the painting hangs in a room like an artifact. And as you come close to the structure, a plate moves in front of it. So now you can't see it. And then a little window starts to open. And as it opens, you hear the sound. So you start to realize there's a relationship between the surface and the painting, which is what I'm interested in. So I was hoping to get other people interested in it. And there's also a light lit across from it. This was actually Florian Grund's idea, which is great. And it creates like a little eclipse effect. So as it opens, you're like watching an eclipse. So I did that. And then a curator saw the work, and she said, oh, Mary, why don't we do a show of your work from painting and sound, because this is kind of interesting. And I don't think, so anyway, I had a show in Montreal that just closed in November, which was looking at my work, this beginning of working with sound, so the cars on the floor and the box that opened up and a few other pieces, and then up into the latest piece. And the latest piece was I took the sounds that Freund Gruen had devised for me, gave them to the composer who I worked with for the box, and he turned them into a fugue. So now the painting can sing. So now I took so then I recreated the little white parts that were scanned, and I have created a stage-like setting where the paintings move back and forth like a fugue. One's in reverse, one's staggered. So that's the latest thing. So this is sort of a long story of how I got interested in sound and where it's going now. So yeah, I also think that a challenge for every artist is to become. I was very aware when I was making these sort of more traditional-looking paintings that I was working in a century-old tradition. And I was aware that I wanted to be involved with what's going on today. I wanted to make painting relevant to today, but I didn't know how. And I also found that people don't look at painting the way, they don't take time to look at painting, so I wanted to slow people down to look at to do what I'm interested in, to look at what I'm interested in, and to sort of keep painting interesting to viewers today. So I have seen when people come into a show, they stay a long time with the paintings. And I think they stay a long time because there's a sound. And they're listening to the sound, how it unfolds, how it moves. And I think it does the same for the sound. By having something moving, one stays with the sound longer as well. So that led me all into this long trail into working with sound. In some ways, I'm sure it comes back to my teaching because I teach, though, just foundation drawing. I have taught in the past seminar classes, and I'm very proud that a number of my students still stay in touch with me. And they started also, I mean, I didn't encourage them. I try not to let anyone, I never talk about what I do in my class. But some of them started to move paintings into space as well. And some of them became interested in architecture, and went on to school in architecture. But anyway, now I teach foundation drawing, and it was my basis, the way I learned. So I think it's a very valuable tool. So I'm very happy to teach it because I think this training that I had, this academic training, is not so commonly taught. And so it's a very easy way to teach all the students to draw. They all have the ability to draw at the end of the class because they go through the various steps and they learn the various, I call them, you could even say they're tricks of how to draw. But they can easily draw a scene in front of them. So I'm very happy to do that. And then I hope, the first day of class, I always show them the film Christo's Running Fence. And it's because it takes a semester to learn these kinds of skills. But I do want them to think outside of the box, whether or not they decide to do it or whether or not they like what Christo does doesn't so much matter to me, but just to have them aware that there's other ways to think about it. And just like I still think I'm a painter, I'm sure that I'm the only person on the face of the earth that thinks I'm a painter, but it's my first love and what drives everything. So for them, I show that, and I ask them why I would show such a work for a drawing class. And of course, the answer is that it's a line in space. His work, that piece, is very much a line in space, and so one could consider it a drawing. So I plant the seed in their heads, and whether or not it stays or they do something with it, I don't know, but I plant it. I think all students have to find their own way, and but having a foundation and in drawing never hurts anyone. I think when I was working with the mechanics, it was very helpful to be able to. This is how we could work things out. I'd say I want to do something, but they needed to see tangible stuff. So this is what I'm doing with the students, and then in my own work, I'm going back to I showed the fugue and that piece that, and there's some things I would like to fix on it. I'm not when I saw it in. Not only when I have an exhibition, not only is it the piece, but I always take into consideration the whole space, the whole room. So I usually go out early and install, and each piece it's basically designed for whatever space it's in. Design is kind of a weird word, but I'm trying to, in each case, orchestrate the space as well as the piece. So the space in the piece in the space. So a piece is often modular, and I can stretch them out or conflate them. So the fugue, when I showed it in Montreal, I think I would like to compress it some and control the lighting more. I've been thinking more about lighting. So I just moved to a new studio and I'm really happy with it. But it took me a while to get it set up, and I will start setting up the piece, resetting it up, and figuring out how to fix that. That bothered me. And then I don't, I just realized I don't have an idea for something after that. I have the fugue. The thing I have after this is that's exciting me and getting me. Well, that's not true. There are two things. I have been asked, but I don't know if I'll be able to get this in time, to recreate Robert Rauschenberg's Open Score, which was a piece he did for 9 evenings, which was a collaboration in the 60s between scientists and artists. It's legendary, and it's probably the first, if not the first, it was one of the most well-known and large attempts for scientists to work with artists. And and it's really amazing because in those days they didn't even have computers, so everything was done with circuitry. So it was very complicated what they were doing, things that would not be so complicated to do now. And so actually I had asked the library to try to get me the schematics of that piece so that I could look at the circuitry schematics and see if I could then translate it faithfully into software. And it uses things like infrared filming, so that they're playing tennis in the Armory in New York, and every time the ball hits a racket, a light goes off, and in the end it's all in darkness, but the audience is all projected onto screens using infrared. And in those days, infrared was only used by the military. So even to get the cameras to do this was very difficult. So anyway, there's someone in Montreal, Alan Thibault, who wants to recreate that piece, and I have been trying to get a hold of the schematics so I could try to help with that. And so that's one thing that I've been sort of working on the back burner. And then another thing that I'm sort of more forward, because I'll be in Berlin this summer. And last time I was in Berlin, I spoke to a theater director about doing a theater piece together, which I'm very excited about. It's very much in the planning stages, so I'm a little, but it would be, so I've been doing now I had the library order me some books on Robert Lepage's work, just to start getting ideas about theater, because I haven't worked in theater before. But a lot of the things, obviously, I'm doing are kind of stagings. And in fact, the fugue, I would say, and in fact, I actually do now refer to it as I'm doing the video of it, and I was writing the description for the video of it, and I refer to the fugue as kind of like an operatic setup, because you have the little paintings moving on this platform, and they all have their own voices, so you could think of it like an opera, actually. So I'm now thinking how I could do that on a much larger scale, and and what kinds of issues come up, and then I would really like to play with lighting more, because it's something I haven't dealt with, and I think by being in a theatrical situation, I could do that. And in fact, with Delay, the piece that has the first one that Florian and I worked with that we scanned, that piece, Florian, the composer, kept telling me, Mary, you want to have a light across from it. And I kept saying, no, I don't want to have a light across from it. I don't know what you're talking about. Because if there was a light across from it, when the person would walk in front, of course, you couldn't see the piece. So I thought he was crazy. And when we were installing it, and this was in Norway, he asked the people in Norway if they had a stage light around. I thought, oh no, he's on that idea again. So they brought a stage light down, and I thought, all right, I mean, I have to be polite. I have to try the stage light because he's been so helpful to me and everything. So we put the stage light up, and I saw that eclipse effect. I was on cloud 9 for days. That was the most brilliant thing ever. That makes the piece. So it's now in total darkness, lit by the spotlight, and now we have this eclipse effect, and people just sit on the side, so they don't go in front of it anyway. I don't know what I was thinking. So with the fugue, I also tried some lighting things, and I'd like to play around with that more. And the piece that the director was sort of, he gave me a postcard of Feininger's work, and Lionel Feininger's work, whose work is very much like, it's cubist, so it's very much like sheets and things in between, which reminds me of the fugue. So I'll see what he comes up with. And usually used to in the past, I would like have the idea for the Baroque ceiling painting or whatever. And then lately, since composers have wanted to do something with me, they give me something, and then I sit on it for a while and see what would work, what might come up, and then usually I usually refer to another piece in the past. Like Delay actually reminds, on some level, it reminds me of Duchamp's The Large Glass, and which was actually called, originally called Delay. It's a longer title, but it was also, and I didn't know that until actually I finished the piece, that Duchamp had originally called The Large Glass, a delay in glass, or something like this. So anyway, my instinct must have been right. So so usually I get the sound, sit on it. This somehow reminds me of something that I then think that refers to painting, so the works always have a reference to past, and then this updating, yeah. So that's what I'm looking forward to.